Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm Rick Fussell and this is the Ingrain Workshop. Last month I built this scratch awl from an old cement drill bit. Now a scratch awl is used to lay out precise locations for drilling hole locations and for also marking metals like brass and aluminum. But in today's video we're going to be building a punch awl. And a punch awl is designed to be able to strike the awl on the head and then punch a hole through, say, a piece of fabric like leather, canvas, or even put a dent or a divot into a piece of wood. That's coming up next here at the Ingrain Workshop. Last week we made a scratch awl. This week we're stepping it up. We're making a striking punch awl. I've got a 1/4 inch by 6 inch carriage bolt that will run all the way through the awl so we can actually strike the end of it without worrying about damaging it. For the handle I'm using a black walnut blank that's roughly 2 inches square by 4 inches long. Nice and chunky for a good grip. So to recap, one 2 inch by 2 inch by 4 inch black walnut blank, one 6 inch by 1/4 inch carriage bolt with a round head, and a 5/8 inch brass ferrule to finish it off. That's it, just 3 pieces to make a tool you'll actually want to show off. Let's get started. First, I'm going to shape the shaft of the awl and the point. I'll also round over the head of the carriage bolt a little bit, that way I can chuck it up in the drill and start shaping the point without it wobbling all over the place. Here at the belt sander, I've got the carriage bolt chucked up in the drill. I'm going to lightly round over the head of the bolt until it's small enough to fit into the chuck securely. Once I've got the head size down, I'll move over to the grinder. There, I'll start removing the threads from the shaft and begin shaping the point. Pro tip, I'm leaving the threads intact where the bolt will pass through the handle. That way, the threads will help lock the shaft into the handle once it's epoxied in place, kind of like a mechanical advantage built right in. Now with the heavy grinding done, I'll head over to the drill press and start smoothing out the shaft. I'm kicking things off with a smoothing file to get rid of the ugly stuff, then jumping to 80 grit sandpaper and working my way up through the grits all the way up to 800. Because if you're going to make it, you might as well make it look good. With the shaft of the awl pretty much done, I'm shifting my focus to the black walnut blank. First, I'll lay out the center points on both ends using the scratch awl I made in the last video. Always nice when your own tools come in handy. With the blank chucked up in the lathe, I'll start by roughing it down to round using a roughing gouge. Once it's rounded, I'll use my dad's old Stanley awl as a template for this handle. I'll lay out the bottom, middle, and top of the handle based on that design. Using calipers, I'll measure the depth of the ferrule so I can mark out the tenon length right on the blank. Then using a parting tool, I'll start cutting down the wood to roughly the tenon diameter. Next, I'll grab a small bowl gouge to shape the top of the handle and start creating the nice concave section in the middle for a better grip. Once the rough shape's looking good, I'll go back to the calipers and fine-tune the tenon to match the inside diameter of the ferrule. Pro tip, I usually leave the tenon about a 1/16 of an inch too big. That way, when you press the ferrule on, it'll cut its own threads into the wood for a nice tight fit. Bigger is better here because you can always take off a little more, but if you make it too small, well, let's just say I've had to start over once or twice. Don't ask me how I know. Following the classic Stanley design, I'll cut 2 beads right at the base of the neck for that old school look and a better grip. To do that, I rest my parting tool flat on the tool rest to cut the grooves, then switch over to the skew and round over the beads. After that, it's back to the small bowl gouge to finish up the main profile of the handle. With the handle shaped the way I want it, it's time to start sanding. Just like with the shaft, I'll start with 80 grit sandpaper and work my way up through the progressions all the way up to 800 for a nice smooth finish. With the handle sanded, I'll take it off the lathe and head over to the bandsaw to cut off the waste at the tenon end. Just the tenon end for now. Then it's back to the lathe. I've swapped out the headstock for a 4-inch self-centering chuck so I can secure the top to the handle and fine-tune the tenon. Using a skew, I'll cut a 45-degree chamfer on the end of the tenon. This will help the ferrule slide on and lock in securely. Now I'm going to drill a pilot hole starting with an 1/8 inch drill bit to make sure I'm centered. Then I'll step it up to a 1/4 inch bit, drilling all the way through the top of the handle but not through the top of the hole blank. Slow and steady here. I don't like surprises, and the last thing I want is this blank shooting out of the lathe. Trust me, it's not as exciting as it sounds. With the hole drilled, I'll install the brass ferrule. I'm using a socket wrench to screw it on, but be careful here, don't over tighten. Wisdom speaking, snap the tenon off now and you'll be real familiar with the phrase back to square one. With the ferrule in place, I'll grab a crosshatch file and round it over nicely. Then using calipers, I'll measure the diameter of the shaft right where it meets the ferrule. From there, I'll pick the properly sized drill bit and drill out the hole in the end of the ferrule to fit the shaft. Just like I did with the shaft and the handle, I'll need to sand down the ferrule. Starting with 80 grit sandpaper, I'll work my way through the grits all the way up to 800 grit to get that nice polished look. Now it's time to take the blank over to the bandsaw and cut off the waste at the top of the handle. If we did everything right, we should expose the 1/4 inch hole we drilled earlier, always a good sign when things line up. Next, I'll head over to the oscillating belt sander and shape the top of the handle. With the top shaped, I'll grab my calipers and measure the diameter of the head of the awl, then pick out the right drill bit. With the handle clamped up in the drill press, I'll use the bit to countersink a hole in the top of the head of the awl so it sits nice and flush. After that, it's time to break out the Scary Sharp sanding system and start cleaning up the top. I'll start with 120 grit and work my way all the way up to 800, because at this point, if we're anything, we're consistent. Now it's time to make this thing shine. I'm going to make sure it passes the supervisor's inspection. With the awl shaft chucked up in my drill, I'll head over to the buffing wheel and bring out the beauty of this bolt before we epoxy it to the handle. So like I mentioned earlier, I left the threads intact where the bolt will be epoxied into the handle. For a little extra strength, because even a broken clock's right twice a day. With the handle clamped in my vise, I'll mix up some clear 5-minute epoxy, and then brush some onto the threads of the shaft and dab a little down into the hole of the handle. You can't see it on camera, but before I clamped up everything, I taped off the ferrule to catch any epoxy squeeze out and keep the bottom of the handle nice and clean. After that, I lightly tapped the shaft into the handle with a hammer, just enough to seat it snug. Once the epoxy had time to cure, I headed back over to the oscillating belt sander and smoothed down the bolt head until it sat just about a 1/16 of an inch proud of the top. Next, it was back over to my Scary Sharp sanding system. I sanded the bolt head, just the bolt head, the same way I sanded the top, starting with 120 grit and working my way up to 800. Sand on, sand off, just like Mr. Miyagi taught us. And yes, those chisels sitting on the table, they're next up on the Scary Sharpening system, but that's a project for another video. Finally, it's time to put some finish on this awl. I'll be using my go-to Formby's tung oil finish. I'll wipe it on, wipe it off, then let it dry for 12 hours. After that, I'll knock it down with some 4/0 steel wool and apply a second coat. Once the second coat dries, I'll finish it off with some Johnson's paste wax for that final shine. And there you go, one handmade striking punch awl ready for action and officially supervisor approved. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. It's solid, it feels great in the hand, and it's going to see a lot of use in the shop. Thanks for hanging out with me in the workshop today, and stick around because next up we're going to be building a set of 3 handmade shop squares. Until then, remember, the best tool in your workshop is the one you made. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. I'll leave links in the video description below to all the tools and equipment that I used on this build. If you're new to the channel and you like DIY and woodworking projects, then I highly recommend that you smash that subscribe button. It's free and painless, and it really helps support the channel. I'd also ask that you ring that bell icon. That way you'll be notified of all our upcoming videos. To all my existing subscribers, I really appreciate all the support that you've given this channel. I'm Rick with the Ingrain Workshop. Until next time, have a wonderful day and God bless.